Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, it's been a while, at least a year or so, since we've had you here.
I believe so.
But Doug Robertson's joining us today. Doug, welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We have a few things to talk about. One of the things, obviously, is you have a new project that you're working on.
Yes.
Along with this one, if you are watching the video, this is the Epiphany limited release.
Yes.
I'm honored. I have a limited release.
You have that is for fans only. They have a special access to that.
I'm going to put that right there. And then, of course, I have the Hey Boss, You're Fired. I fired my boss coffee cup that you gave me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Put that right there and put some bourbon in it later. Anyway, let's catch up a little bit about what you're doing these days. One of the things I wanted to talk about was you had approached me some months back about what an older guy in the business, and I'm not trying to be kind. Let's face it, you and I are about the same age. An older guy in the business, what can an older guy in the business accomplish? How can I be successful? And you and I bounced a couple things around. How did that work out for you?
A lot of it depends on how you define success.
That's true. Yeah.
If you're defining success as making a lot of money, you'll probably do better on retirement.
But honestly, about 0.1% of anybody's in the music business, if they define their success on making a lot of money, that's about what it is, 0.1%. Yeah. The rest of it is, are you happy doing what you're doing? Are you making some money, putting it in your pocket, putting that in the bank? That could still be considered success.
And that's where I've been doing some realigning, looking at my age, at what I'm capable of doing. A 2-hour show isn't as easy for me to pull off as it was when I was in my 20s. And I think it was Joe Walsh that said, it was much more fun being 20 in the 70s than it is being 70 in the 20s. And I'm not quite there yet, but I am in the 20s. And doing those shows and trying to keep up the energy. You know, I'm a fan of Tom Jackson. And boy, if you're going to do a show like he has you do, you're going to be all over the stage and lots of energy. And I try to pull that off.
Yeah.
But by golly, especially if you're playing outdoors in Nashville, it is a rough go. So I've started looking at what I can do, maybe step back a little bit from the performing and go a little bit more toward the songwriting and crafting more songs. I started looking into other songwriters. I've been working with a guy named Gary Kavanaugh. Roy August is a fan of mine. He wrote Setting Fancy Free with Jimbo Hinson. Oak Ridge Boys made a hit out of that song.
Right, that's right.
Well, he's a fan of mine, and he started sending me songs and saying, I want you to write with me. So I'm writing with him. There's a guy named Carnage the Executioner. I met him at a CD Baby conference. He was a keynote speaker there. And the guy's great. He's a beatbox guy.
Okay.
And so he has a looper, and he just does everything with his mouth, and he gets all these sounds and rhythms and stuff going. He wants to take some of my songs and remix them in hip-hop. So in my elder years, I just might become a hip-hop star. Who knows?
You know, it's anything's possible. And you're going down a path that not too many others at our age would even consider doing.
You have to adapt, though.
Yeah.
If you're our age, I would say most people our age that are digitally aware at all, streaming aware, they're doing Netflix and Pandora. Pandora was around long before Spotify and before Apple really got their
almost
thing
going
together.
back to MySpace era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people our age, they might be more used to Pandora. I've just kind of gotten an awakening about Pandora, and that's where a lot of my demographic might actually be, because they know how to work the right buttons to get the sound they want.
You just brought up something that I think is really a key topic of conversation. Before the show, you said, hey, so what are we going to talk about? And I said, well, we're going to go wherever the journey takes us. But I think what you just said, and that is finding your audience, finding that demographic, finding that demographic, because, you know, let's face it, guys like you and I, we're not going to reach the tweens. You know, we're not going to reach those 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. Our audience is a lot different. Now, podcasting world is different than the live entertaining world or the recording world such as you. We have somewhat of a captive audience. Our listeners listen to us in the car while they're at work or at home as a topic of conversation. On the other hand, you're providing a musical platform of creativity, something that you've created, that content you've created. And it really does it shrinks the demographics a little bit because of what you're talking about.
You're becoming a niche artist.
The song, Hey Boss, You're Fired. You know, can an 18-year-old relate to that? Sure. But the guy who's had the job for 20 or 30 years, who's put in the 8 hours every day or more, 5 days a week, and wore the suit and the tie, we've all gotten to that point where we wanted to go, hey, boss, you're fired.
It's a great retirement song.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get it. But so finding your demographic, finding the demographic, group.
Figuring out how the technology works, that's the big challenge. Dealing with Spotify and playlists and all the rest that goes with it. And then understanding what you have to do in just releasing a song. You have 6 weeks before you release it. You've got to start the promotion and get all that stuff out. And even months before that, you need to have somebody on your team that knows how to get your stuff into music publications so you can actually get some print about yourself. There's so many different avenues that you have to think of, and the technology to get there is difficult to learn, and then finding legitimate people that are in those fields is even more difficult to learn. I just went on to TikTok because that's what they say. You've got to be on TikTok, you've got to be on Instagram and Facebook and all the rest of them. And so you have to do reels and you have to continually be creating content for these things. Well, I've just recently started going on to TikTok and putting my reels on. And of course, you stay a couple minutes and you start looking at what TikTok is. And 90% of what I see is young women staring at their screen.
That's just a good analogy. It really is.
Looking at comments of people that are telling her to take off her clothes or whatever they want her to do. And that's it. And these people will do this for hours. Well, if you're retired, you'd probably rather just go watch a movie.
Plus, let's face it, people aren't going to watch someone like you or me staring.
Not for hours.
Not for hours, no.
They're definitely not going to ask us to take our clothes off.
Thank goodness. Oh, my gosh. Lord help us. Okay, so, and then you mentioned finding the people to help you, because let's face it, TikTok wasn't around when you and I started. Really, Spotify and, insert name, most of these weren't around when you and I got into the business. It was very analog. It was very organic back in those days. I love what you said, that you really have to do 6 weeks of prep work to get a song out there.
Yes.
When I worked at the record label, we had about a week setup, maybe 2 weeks at most. We'd let the radio stations know the song's coming. Now, we would say officially, hey, the song's coming out November 30th, be ready. But we didn't care if anybody added it early. We'd give them to them whenever they wanted it, and we just wanted to see if the thing would grow. But it's a lot different world now.
And you also had a team of people that would do the promotion
Absolutely.
and handle the distribution and yada, yada, yada. There were so many different pieces of the puzzle that got put together by the team at the record company, which is why the recording artists there wouldn't make all that much. Well, now, percentage-wise, you're making all of it, but then you're doing all of it also. And that's where the rub is, because there's just some stuff that you don't have the connections or I might be a great songwriter, but writing copy for a publicist to send out is a different thing.
Right. Do you find when you're trying to seek out those people to help you, do you find it difficult to find those individuals that can relate to what it is that you're doing? Is there an age difference there? Because once again, we're not talking about a lot of people our age that are still in the business.
I've not really found any problem with people relating to my age or to the style of my music. Just an aside, I spent some time working with a song plugger over the summer, and her name is Sharon Clark. I don't know if you know her.
Mm-mm.
But she gave me some great insights. But at the very beginning, when she was listening to my music, and she is around our age, but her job is to get songs placed into the marketplace. And so first thing she says when she starts helping me analyze what I'm doing, she's listened to it for a bit, and she says, I'm trying to find a nice way to say this, but your music is a little bit dated. And I said, well, thank you very much, because I call what I do new vintage acoustic rock, and it's not vintage for no reason.
Yeah, right.
That I write purposely for that, as an older audience would enjoy. So that eased up things between her and I learned a whole lot from her. But as far as the publicists go, the people that I have been able to get in contact with, they really don't need to relate so much to the music as they need to have the know-how of where to send your particular genre or your particular thing to get the biggest
style,
bang.
Right.
Yeah, your style to get the biggest bang out of the buck. And so, but it's still, you still want to get your name in Rolling Stone. You still want to get your name on Billboard. You still want to get your name into these publications that are music publications all over.
Correct. They're
the ones that have the ins. They're the ones that know how those things work and how to get into those things. So that's one area of finding your audience, and that's kind of a shotgun blast. It's nice to get your name out there. It's nice to be able to have a copy of Billboard that way in the back pages, there's one line that Doug Robertson came out with the song this week. But it's not necessarily going to do much for you other than fulfill that responsibility of getting your name out there. I'm a big fan of Rick Barker, although I don't do a lot of what he does because I just don't have the time to do it all, and some of it I just don't understand. But one of the things that he says is to take, you can $1 a day on Facebook. You can go into the Meta or whatever they call their organization, and you can find artists that are similar to what you do. So that's one area where Spotify and Pandora and those places are really nice because they will give you feedback on who is like your music. and then you put those names in, John Prine or whoever. And so you put those names in when you're advertising, and you ask Facebook to search out people that like these particular artists and advertise to them. And then you'll get an audience from there, and that gives you, a listing of potential fans that you then can approach with your music and try to get them interested in what you're doing.
In the studio with us here today, Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table is Doug Robertson.
Hi, this is Joan L. Mosser, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Doug Song Guy Robertson is sitting across the podcast table from me. You have had quite the musical journey for how many years?
I started, I think I was 9, watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan with my grandmother taking me into the room saying, I want you to listen to a musical group. And
don't turn out like them.
Well, she didn't say that. She really was a believer in my musical career even at that point.
At 9 years old.
At 9 years old. But she, I thought she was going to have me watch Sing Along with Mitch or Lawrence Welk or something. And I go out there, and there are these guys singing and playing guitar, and they were pretty good. The music was pretty good. But what got my interest was the girls in the audience pulling their hair out and screaming and fainting. And I thought, gee, I want some of that. My little 9-year-old brain.
Your musical journey started at 9. When did you really start taking this on as a serious profession?
I wanted to do it since middle school and high school. I earnestly learned how to play my guitar and sing, and we'd be doing all our songs in the quad. This is during the 69, 70, 71 era. And so I'm singing Crosby, Stills, and Nash with my buddies in the quad. And ended up, I was in the L.A. area, and I was fortunate enough to get involved with LASS, which was the Los Angeles Alternative Chorus Songwriter Showcase, which was run by John Brahaney and Len Chandler. And those that know the music business and know songwriting know that those guys were the pioneers in analyzing what made a hit song, and were able to actually train people to write songs that could be hits. So I spent time listening to them and going to the showcases. Capitol Records, that big building that looks like a stack of records in Hollywood you see in the movies. We would go there in the basement once a month, where they had the recording studio for orchestras. They'd set up some grandstands and bring popcorn and wine and showcase artists out there, showcase songwriters. And I was one of the ones that would get showcased every so often.
See, I never knew this about you. That's great. I love that.
It was an amazing time. And again, this is in the early 70s. So I got that experience. I was able to go to UCLA for a semester and take songwriting from Al Kasha, who was a big Broadway writer. So there was an awful lot of material there that I learned and developed and totally ignored for many, many years until I realized, ignoring that really hasn't benefited my career at all.
Yeah.
But I was trying to be a big hit writer, and of course I was an arrogant kid that thought, well, what do these guys really know about music?
Your writing style, you talk about starting to write back in those days versus what it is today. I was listening to one song earlier called Eat Good that you had written that I absolutely loved. And I thought, okay, this to me is what I would enjoy listening to on the radio. And I don't think there's enough of it out there like that. But how you put a song together back then versus how you put a song today, how much of that has changed, or has it for you?
I think what's changed, well, I'm not even sure that's changed. I started out really learning how to write songs, despite John Braheny and Al Kasha and those guys
getting in your way, right?
These guys are getting in my way. I would take songs that were already hits, and I would rewrite them. I would take a Beatles song, and I would rewrite the lyrics and use their music. And then I'd go the other way around, and I'd use their lyrics, and I'd try to write different music to it. And so that taught me a lot about structure and about how songs work, and it kind of gave me at least an innate sense of why a song may work over what I was doing to it.
Is this something that you came up with on your own, or was this something that somebody pointed you in the right direction? Because I wouldn't think about taking, like, say, a Beatles song and taking the lyrics and writing my own music to it, or vice versa.
I was, again, this is the arrogant 9-year-old that wanted to be like the Beatles. I didn't know guitar then. I had a guitar, and my very, very first song was playing my guitar, using my E string, and I was just doing the melody of what my new song was, and it was taken after Beach Boys material. And I decided I'd write that surfer boy was the best surfer of them all. And then I had a little lead lick, da-da-da. And then one day he went for that wave, and that wave took him out to sea. We haven't seen that surfer boy since that day. And then the lead lick, da-da-da. And it was that kind of experimentation that I did that led to taking the Beatles songs and changing them around, and other people's music. Then, after a while, I learned that I really can't copy what everybody else did exactly and just put my own thing to it. So I would experiment with chords and music and melodies and try to find something that I hadn't done before. I think everybody's gone through the phase where they're doing the 1-4-5 blues progressions.
Because it's easy.
Yeah.
It's simple.
And I can say I probably have 5 or 6 or 7 songs that are just that. But after a while, I get tired of doing that, so I have to figure something else out. So I'll sit at a piano and just play around with notes and chords on a piano. And that gives me an idea. Then I translate it back to guitar, and that's a different style. Or I'll just throw in some chords that make no sense to me because I'm not that good at music theory. So I'm throwing these fingers on my fretboard and I strum it and go, does that sound good? No. Okay, try something else. Does that sound good? Oh, that's kind of cool. And so I'll develop from there.
Build your own chords.
I'll build my own chords and then try to figure it out what the names of those chords are later, and usually I'm wrong.
When I was a kid in junior high and high school, I actually went out and bought a book of chords written by Ted Green. I don't know if you remember him or not, but this book was full of 800 different ways to play an E chord or a G chord or an A chord. And it was very stimulating finger exercises. But at one point, when I was playing guitar, after having left the bass and before I started playing keyboards, I realized that, okay, I could know 800 different ways on how to play an E chord, but unless I was going to be some kind of a fusion new age jazz musician, I just didn't see the world for it. You know, maybe I should say I didn't see the reason for it, and tried to keep things simplistic. Was that kind of your approach too?
Yeah, I would. Of course, I have to be able to remember what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, that helps.
And know where my fingers are supposed to go, especially as you develop a catalog and you're going out and performing, and you're going to perform for 2 hours, and you've got all these different songs of all these different styles. I had songs that were country. I didn't know they were country. I thought they were rock and roll. And then I had country songs that ended up being the opposite, being rock and roll songs.
Was that because somebody told you that, or that's just
generally?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would go to one of these songwriting conventions or a music convention, and they always have the publishers there that are going to listen, and so I would go, okay, this guy is rock and roll, or this guy's rock, so I'm going to take my rock song to him. And I played it for him, and they said, that's not rock, that's country. Oh, okay. Somewhere along the line, the line between rock and country moved.
Yeah.
And because it was rock and roll when I played it, or when I wrote it. So, yeah, things are constantly changing.
Let's get back to your songwriting style now. Is it easy? Is it as easy? Is it easier? Is it less so writing than it was back in the day for you? Do you still come up with creative ideas? And let's use the song Eat Good as a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Where does something like that come from?
Schlotzsky's Deli.
Oh, okay. Which are hard to find anymore.
Right.
Find a good Schlotzsky's Deli anywhere around here.
It's a little Texas fast food restaurant that expanded and then kind of retracted.
Yeah.
We had two of them. I lived in Reno, Nevada for 36 years. And in the 90s, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, they had 2 stores out in Reno. And I played out there. And if those of us old enough to remember the Schlotzsky's commercials, they were very innovative musically. They'd have very creative songs for their product. And so I thought I'd get in on that. And so I was talking to the owner of the 2 Schlotzsky's Delis I was playing at, and wrote that little ditty, Eat Good, for them. And it had some different lyrics. Funny name, serious sandwich. And because you had to put in their little catch line. It never really got anywhere, so I decided, well, I'll just change the lyrics out and make it a little more general. So I have a little bit more general song from that now. That was something I hadn't played with. It's a swampy blues tune. I haven't released it yet, so hopefully it'll be released in 2023.
Is that going to be part of your new project you're working on?
That's part of the new project, yes.
Yeah. Because jumping back a little bit, the Epiphany, especially the limited release I have here in my hands, this came out when?
2020.
Yeah. This is your most recent one, correct?
Yes, and it's coming out kind of in 2 parts. Epiphany itself is slightly different. It's only 6 songs. It's an EP. And all of those songs have been released now. You can hear all of those songs on Spotify or any of the platforms. The newer songs just started coming out in September. No Competition came out. That, to me, that's a fun song. It's the first time I've written an actual rockabilly tune. And again, when I'm writing, I'm trying to find something different to do than I've done before. I've done the 1-4-5s. So I'm playing around and trying to figure out a different way to do the 1-4-5. And so I come up with this tune, No Competition. And it sounded a little country to me, and it started sounding a little bit more like Stray Cats. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go with that.
But let's jump back to what I was asking earlier, the songwriting, those creative juices. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that it's still a very deep pool for you to pull from?
I do, and I think that what happened is in the middle of my career, in my 40s and 50s, I was pretty much doing the same thing over and over again and just kind of coasting on old songs that I'd written. Then more recently, particularly since I've taken this turn in my career, started looking at songwriting a little bit more carefully, I'm looking to challenge myself. And so I just wrote a song about catching a cold.
Yeah, perfect time of the year for that.
It's the perfect time. Unfortunately, I can't pitch it until next June.
Yeah.
But
well, just in time for the flu and cold season for next fall.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll be ready for Bayer aspirin to pick it up. But I'm trying to challenge myself to do some other things. One of the reasons I spent time with a song plugger over the summer was to understand a little bit more where I might have gaps in my own songwriting, and particularly as it relates to the commercial world. I think that I write really good songs, but I understand that my songs are not necessarily fit for the commercial world. I'm not sure. I don't know that Garth Brooks, well, even Garth Brooks is kind of passé now. Whoever the current big name is, isn't necessarily going to pick up on my stuff. And a couple reasons for that is just the way songs are being picked up right now. They're being picked up with inner rhymes. So there's a lot of inner rhyme going on in the verses. There's an unexpected rhymes. If you have an expected rhyme to, my first line of the song is, I've got a cold taking hold. And hopefully taking hold isn't expected when you say, I've got a cold. So just trying to do things like that and trying to mold the song to see if I can make it a little more creative, a little bit more commercial. And to me, people say that's a bad word. To me, commercial means communication. When you can come up with something that in 3 minutes communicates to a large number of the population, to a major portion of the population, then you have communicated something. Now, in addition to that, somebody made a whole bunch of money off of that communication.
Right.
Yep. And they call that commercial. But it's actually a communication technique. And if songwriting is communicating, then it makes sense to try to hone it so much that you can communicate whatever it is you want to say to a larger audience.
On the show with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, Doug Robertson.
Hi, this is Vale Johnson, bass player for myself, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilogue, the Kronos, Wave State, Op 6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with Doug Robertson, we're talking about all kinds of things that are going on in your career. New project that you have coming out now. Is it titled yet? Have you finished it? You still working on it?
I've decided, I'm not sure, but the Epiphany CDs that I've created may be my last album efforts.
Really?
Yes.
What brought you to that conclusion?
People don't know what to do with a CD anymore.
Yeah.
it's become coasters for most people. I got a CD for my wife a few months ago of an artist that she likes, and I handed her the CD, and she didn't have a way to play it other than in her car.
And at the same time, though, that for me, someone who's an analog guy in a digital world, I miss holding this piece of product. I miss reading the liner notes. I want to know who the writers were, who were the session players, where it was recorded. We've kind of lost that magic of that, haven't we?
And anymore, that's something that you put on your website, that you put onto your Facebook and Instagram posts. It's not really something you can hold in your hand anymore. And that's a big difference between our generation and what younger people are doing. They don't want to have it in their hands. They've got too many things going on. So they just want their phone. If they can access it through their phone, you're good.
Yeah. It's kind of sad commentary, though, at the same time. But let's jump back to the new project. So Epiphany might be the last hurrah. Everything else after that will just be singles?
Yes. And that's how I'm handling the last half. The Epiphany limited edition that I handed you today.
Right. That
has the first 6 songs that are already released. And I released them on CD Baby as an album, as a EP. And it has a slightly different cover on it. In the lower right-hand corner, you see the actual cover of the Epiphany album. So the Epiphany limited edition that I created for fans has the next 6 songs, mainly so my fans can get access to that before I actually release it. So those next 6 songs, I'm going to try to strategically release over the next year or two.
Do you market yourself differently now that you're looking at more of being a singles artist than you are an album artist? And when I say singles, it's not singles necessarily at radio, because that's not really the game we play too much anymore, now that we have Spotify and, as you said, Pandora and other playing platforms. But is your attack plan, your game plan, is it different?
Mine hasn't, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. I'm just doing what I've learned how to do, what I think I know how to do, and I still have the same holes and blind spots that I had when I was promoting the album.
Are you finding people that can help you maybe navigate those potholes in the road?
That is the most difficult part of the journey.
Okay.
When you go online, anybody that's been online, particularly if they've presented themselves as some kind of an artist or having something to present, you get tons of people that are responding to you, all for the wrong reasons. You have the con artists that are trying to get you into a romantic relationship where you can give them money, or into they want you to buy Bitcoin, or they come in all kinds of angles. One of the most common ones that I've seen is, send me your picture, and I'll put it onto my Instagram page for $25.
What a deal. What a bargain.
Yeah. And I go to their page and I see they don't have many, they got 15 followers, and they want me to pay $25 to put my picture on their page. And how is that going to help me?
Yeah.
What's that going to do for my career? So you do have to be very wise about deciding who you're going to trust. And then even beyond that, they're offering all kinds of things. We will promote your thing, to the point to where now there's even people that claim that they're promoters and that they can help you promote your product. That, again, is something that it's difficult to try to wade through. Again, they want a fee for their service, which is reasonable. But that fee is going to, who's it going to? Is it going to somebody with experience? Is it going to somebody that has the connections that you need them to have? I've hired some folks in the past that have been helpful to some degree or another, usually not to the degree that I want.
Right.
One of the gals that I hired was very good at creating reels, which is different than posts. which is different from stories. So I learned from her to create reels. And that was just before Instagram changed over to all reels. Now, if you have posts on Instagram, if it's just a static picture with a comment on it, that now is in your reel box. So they don't want static pictures. They want action. So you have to create the action. So she taught me how to do that. She and I both bemoan the fact that you don't hold the camera correctly when you're making reels. You're supposed to hold the camera sideways and get the landscape.
Yeah, instead of a portrait, it needs to be horizontal instead of vertical.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a big bone of contention for me for years.
But now, if you're going to put if all your major advertising is on Spotify or is on Instagram and Facebook, you're going to have to do it their way. So you have to film it wrong.
Right, correct.
But finding somebody that I just recently had actually Eat Good, I was going to try to release for the month of November of 2022. And I decided to pull that back because of a disappointing relationship that I hoped was going to work out with someone that could help me with the publicity side. And it just fell through. The person that relationship never really coagulated.
Yeah.
So, and I was hoping that she would be able to take on this song and then the other songs coming after, because I would really like to release something about every 2 months. But again, I'm on the market. I'm looking around to see who it is I can depend on, who's reliable.
I think that can honestly be the toughest thing you ever have to do, and that's assembling that team that you can rely on.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more of the indie artists starting to align themselves with not so much an indie label, but indie marketing companies.
Yes.
But even they only have a limited amount of resources from a staffing perspective. I mean, if you have 5 or 6 people working 20, 30 projects, something's going to probably fall through the cracks at some point. And you don't want it to be you, especially if you're paying for it.
Right. You have to stay on top of whoever you're working with. And looking at a company like that, you need to take a look at what's already on their plate. If they've got a whole bunch of people on their plate, and this is, I think, the problem that I had with this one person that I wanted to connect with, that I think she just had too many people on her plate and too much to do, and I don't know why she didn't respond and just say, no, I can't take you. But that would have been a lot easier to handle than just waiting for a response and then never coming.
The ghosting.
Yeah, the ghosting. So you have to take a look at it's quite a balance, because they have to be big enough to where they can be effective and they have a track record, but they have to be small enough to know that you won't get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And then you have to stay on top of them anyway, just to make sure you don't get lost in the shuffle.
That's a balancing act.
And that means that you're continually creating content for them to work with. And that's part of your job.
So let's find out, how can people find you? How can they find Doug Song Guy Robertson?
SONGUY.com. Song Guy, just one G. I'm on Instagram as Doug Song Guy Robertson. The same thing on TikTok and Facebook. So you can contact me there. I'd love to hear from people that are interested in working with me. I have something called my Widespread Crew, which is an email list, which is something we hadn't even talked about, having an email list. And those are people that I actually do go to for help. And they have helped me with various projects that I've done.
When you go to them, when you say you're going to them for help, what kind of help are you seeking?
I had a song that did very well called Why Are Armadillos in Nashville?
Right.
There's a cartoon to that on the video. It's a lot of fun. I had the people that are on my Widespread Crew, they gave me the names and some of the backstory of the cartoon characters. And we just had a blast going through there and finding cartoon characters and giving them names and giving them a backstory. And I used that in my promotion for the song. Another thing that they can do is I love playing smaller venues. So if they have a house that they could bring their friends in and I could come in and do a show, that's the kind of thing I'm open to. Some of them have expertise in various forms of production. As I don't know if, I think I did mention that one of my fans on that list is Roy August, who wrote Setting Fancy Free. There was a big hit for the Oak Ridge Boys.
Yeah.
And he's started writing with me. So I never know who's going to be on that list. And so I'll send out a note saying, here's what I need. Anybody out there have the time to help me with it?
I think email lists are extremely important. I know that, in fact, we have just spent the last few days, an associate of mine and myself, going through our email list of about 40,000 people and culling out the ones that are either not responsive or it's bouncing back. It's no longer a valid email address. That in itself could be a full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're a small operation, you still got to take the time out of your day to make those things work. Because otherwise that email list is not doing you any good.
Right. It needs to be effective. It needs to be going to the right people. It needs to be going to people that are willing to be engaged with your career. So after your mom and dad and brother and sister sign up for it, the other people have to really have an interest in your career enough to put themselves out for it.
Doug, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's been my joy. Such a good time being back here again.
I always love having you.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.